would like to start the official program of this IAF 3G Diversity Breakfast. My name is Elena Feichtinger. I am working at the IAF Secretary as a volunteer, and I am taking care of IAF 3G Diversity Program. And it is my honor to lead you through this breakfast. To open this program, I have the pleasure to ask the IAF President, Dr. Jean-Yves Le Gall, to take the floor for a welcome and introduction. Jean-Yves, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning, because it's the middle of the night for some of us, but and for some other ones it's the evening, so it's the charm of international cooperation. So as president, okay, I didn't speak in the right one. It's a consequence of the middle of the night, but as president of the IAF, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this new edition of the IAF ID3G Diversity Breakfast here at the 68th International Astronautical Congress 2017 in Adelaide. And once again, thank you for being with us at such early hour. First, Women on the Moon. It's a little bit intriguing because all of us, people from my generation, we know the song Men on the Moon. I think that it is probably REM, if I remember well. But Women on the Moon, up to now, it doesn't exist. And so it means that one day we will have the first woman on the moon. And this is why we decided to choose this title for this networking breakfast. And I think that we shall put our focus on the epochal and historic event in mankind, the future of the first woman to set foot on the moon. Based on an initiative of the International Lunar Observatory Association, ILOA, the organizer of regular Galaxy Forums and IAF member since 2011, we have designed this event to provide an opportunity to hear about the perspectives of the first female astronaut setting foot on the moon, the plans of space agencies and industry in advancing a moon village concept with an inclusive participation, and the opinions of those who have been and will be the ambassadors of humankind in exploring the universe. So, I mean, of course, our astronauts. With this event, we wish to draw the attention of a global space community on the long overdue consideration of the historic significance of the first woman on the moon, as was the first man on the moon almost 50 years ago. We will celebrate this anniversary in July 2019, and in 2019, as you know, we will have our IAC in Washington, D.C., which will be the perfect timing. So this morning, we will have the privilege to hear keynotes from 4 distinguished speakers. First, Mr. Steve Durst, who is the founding director of the International Lunar Observatory Association. Second, Professor Jan Werner, Director General of the European Space Agency and IAF Vice President. Third, Mrs. Danielle Ritchie, Systems Engineer at Lockheed Martin Space Systems Company. And last but not least, Dr. Sandy Magnus, Executive Director of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, AIAA. Our IAF Vice President for Diversity Initiatives, Mrs. Marie Snitch from Lockheed Martin, will provide concluding remarks. But I think that the key point, if we want this breakfast to be a success, is that it should not be a one-way communication event. And we would like to involve and engage you, all of you, in brainstorming on this topic and get your opinions and feedback. This is why we ask Sylvia Alba, our IAF graphic recorder, to prepare one poster, it should be there, with 3 columns that you can see in front of you. And every column puts forward one key question to the audience, documented in a graphical manner and conveying the topic of the breakfast. Every column also suggests 3 or 5 possible answers, and we would like to ask you to express your opinions when going to take a coffee during the breakfast by marking your preferred answers on the poster. The 3 questions we are asking are the following. The first one: the first woman to fly to space was Valentina Tereshkova from Russia in the early 60s, just a few years after the first flight of Yuri Gagarin. And which nationality do you expect the first woman to set foot on the moon will be? And there are 5 options: American, European, Russian, Chinese, or others. Second question: more than 60 female astronauts have flown to space already and have a space flight experience. And do you expect the first woman to set foot on the moon to be a veteran astronaut with space flight experience, B, a new generation professional astronaut, C, a space tourist? Third question: it is almost 50 years since the first man, Neil Armstrong, has set foot on the moon. When do you expect to see the historic moment of a female astronaut to follow? A, before 2020. If you answer that, you have to rush because we are late. Second, before 2020, 2025, and third, after 2025. And the results of this audience query will be presented by Mrs. Mary Snitch during her closing remarks. So this is what I wanted to tell you as an introduction. It is not just an introduction, it's also the proposal for this, let us say, funny game. And once again, welcome, enjoy the presentations because it is the most important, the discussions and also the networking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johnny, for your introduction. And our first distinguished keynote speaker today is Mr. Steve Durst, founding director of the International Lunar Observatory Association, who has initiated the idea of today's topic. He will give us his thoughts on the historic significance of the first woman on the moon. Steve, please.
Good morning, everybody. I appreciate your early rise, and I appreciate very much the enterprise of IAF to hold this event. A word or two about how this event, from our perspective at ILOA and Space Age Publishing Company, came to be. I attended a wonderful 3G luncheon 3 months ago at the Global Space Exploration Forum in Beijing, and all manner of female accomplishments in all fields of science and technology and engineering endeavor was mentioned. The prospect of women on Mars was discussed, and I asked myself, well, why has the question of, the obvious question, a first woman on the moon, of women on the moon, not been discussed? And afterwards, I wrote these thoughts to President de Gaulle and Executive Director Christian Feichtinger about why has the the question of women on the moon not been discussed. And voila, here is the answer to that, and the event has been staged, much to my great surprise and appreciation. Before I go further, 60 women have traveled in space, 60 female astronauts. And when we began this research about women on the moon about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, I asked myself, and this is my business to follow the news, how many female astronauts there had been, and I guessed 30, 35. And I was very surprised to see the number 60. And you might yourself ask your colleagues, not here, that same question, and you'd be surprised. The answers are 3, 5, 15, usually 20. But very rarely will people answer their belief that there have been more than 20 female astronauts. I think the next slide is right here. Another question of how this idea became attractive. For decades, on a personal level, every once in a while, I'd chide my progressive female friends and say, well, women will never gain true equality with men until women have walked on the moon. And what could I do with that anyhow? It was just a thought and perhaps a truism. Last year, about this time last year, a little earlier, with the USA presidential campaign in full swing, our publishing company decided to take an advocacy position and raise this question to both candidates advocating women on the moon. It seemed like a good idea, especially with a leading female candidate, to put to both candidates. And regardless of either candidate, regardless of the election, it still seemed like a good idea, and we followed through with that advocacy. And I will conclude my talk in a few minutes showing the spread of this idea, perhaps an idea whose time has come. The location or the mission that may see this realization of women on the moon may coincide with our major mission of putting an observatory, an astronomical and communications facility, an astronomical observatory on the moon at the south pole of the moon, which seems to be the consensus destination now 20 years all around the world. The asset-rich south pole may be the location where human settlement is most likely to rise. And it could well be that women astronauts will participate in the ILO-1 mission of putting a telescope on the moon. We have some handouts at the front table there, one being this poster. I don't know that we had enough, but it is available online at iloa.org, and you can download it there. Another poster is an artist's vision. Michael Carroll did this, a famous, a well-renowned space artist, showing the placement of the ILO-1 observatory on Malapert Mountain, a 5,000-meter mountain at the south pole of the moon, receiving maximum sunlight, one of the so-called peaks of eternal light, with 24/7 vision and communications to Earth. In that asset-rich locale of the moon's south pole, ice water deposits, Aitken Basin, south pole, ambient and more moderate temperature, and great southern skies for galaxy observation, which is our first light objective. I think that the question that we kept coming back to, and it's a very challenging one, is why should not the landing of the first woman on the moon be as significant and historic and epical as the landing of the first man on the moon was. And we all know the effect of the results of that accomplishment. And it could well be a game changer that when women are on the moon, we not only reclaim our existence as a multi-world species, but we pioneer and open the existence of humanity as a multi-world civilization. Who will be the first woman on the moon? President Legault mentioned the interactive process and questionnaire that has been put before us. Which nationality? And I should say that the Japanese, we found Japanese female space enthusiasts. The only two directors on the ILOA board are from Japan, one being Naoko Yamasaki, the second Japanese female astronaut. Where will she come from? From established, from experienced astronautical missions, from the next generation of pioneers, be it a space agency government astronaut, a candidate, or from an independent institution, organization. And the final question, I know I should not ask directly, but it would be interesting to know. I believe the youngest astronaut may be Helen Sharman, who was 27 years old when she went to space. With the historic 50th anniversary of humanity's accomplishment of becoming a multi-world species in those few glorious fleeting days of the 60s and the 70s when we were a multi-world species, and that is unforgettable and serves as a great motivation, an inescapable motivation and inspiration for many of us, is approaching, as President Legault noted, very shortly. And this idea, we are finding, is a cross-cutting, a transnational, a transcending dynamic, much like new space or commercial space, transnational, cross-cutting, touching a lot of boundaries. Perhaps a very appropriate way to commemorate the Apollo 11 landing. And as far as the historical evolution, certainly the Moon Village concept, all-inclusive as it is, both implicitly and explicitly recognized this dynamic of a civilization, including all people, on the moon. We began our advocacy in the USA 2016 presidential campaign, addressing both parties to respond to this question. We did actually have some response from the Republican side, surprising as that may be. We've seen in recent months this idea articulated by a phenomena very unique to this decade, the Starship concept. The interstellar workshops and organizations raised the question, are women allowed on the moon, somewhat facetiously. The National Space Society, the lead advocacy, Washington, D.C. based advocacy organization in USA, featured on their magazine, their summer edition last month, a lead story on the same topic, who will be the first woman on the moon. A month or two before that, an Italian journalist, Cavallaro, published a book, I think in March, with the subject, with that subject, Women's Spacefarers, 60 Different Paths to Space, an excellent book. Here, of course, this meeting is amplifying that dynamic and that possibility and that initiative. And coming up in 2 weeks, I think this is a very dynamic and fast-moving idea, again, whose time has come. On October 13th, on both sides of USA, in California, with our program at Stanford, which was founded in the year 2000, the Stanford on the Moon Initiative, where I went to school. We will have our annual alumni conference and a first presentation on the subject by the founder of the Space Generation Advisory Committee, Loretta Hidalgo Whitesides, will be addressing that subject, First Woman on the Moon. At the same time, in the Washington, D.C. area, the LEAG organization, the Lunar Exploration Analysis Group, headed by Clive Neal, will be having a Back to the Moon workshop. And Clive Neal was one of and the LEAG organization last year, before the election, was one of the first to advocate for women on the moon. And that will take place the same day, Friday, 13 October. And I think we will see a great interest and discussion on that subject at that time. And I hope so. I think it would be a wonderful face for the American space program, perhaps for world politics, to address that and that challenge. And again, why should not the landing of the first woman on the moon be just as important and impactful as the landing of the first man on the moon? Whoop. So, as we say in our home state, Hawaii, aloha. I welcome you all there. I'd love to take you to my favorite place on planet Earth, the top of Mauna Kea, home to 13 world-class observatories, which we hope to use as a base for our next step forward to the next frontier of astronomy on the moon. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Let me remind you, please give your feedback to us here on our posters. You can put only dots very quickly. And our next distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Jan Wörner, he's already here, Director General of the European Space Agency and Vice President. He will give his thoughts of the moon concept. Thank you, Jan.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. And, not that loud. Good morning, everybody. It's for me already a tradition, these early breakfasts with women. And it's interesting that more and more men are also there, but we have to be a little bit careful not to take over as men this women breakfast. I will talk about the Moon Village. The Moon Village is difficult to understand, as I learned. I thought it's a very simple concept, but day by day I learned it's getting more and more difficult. But as we are talking here also about women in space and women on the moon, let's first have a look to the moon. So this is the moon, the desired place. And in many languages, the moon is female, for instance, in French, la lune. In German language, unfortunately, it's male. But it's interesting that the moon is in history in many, many different countries. There is always something with goddess and so with moon. So for instance, over here you see this one is the one with the, so there in the Mayan mythology, Lady Rainbow, a goddess, and you see very nicely how this fits into the picture of the moon. So there is a lot of these pictures that I will not go into, but there is another very important step, and this is the first woman on or in the moon. It's a very famous movie. I don't know whether you know it, but at least you know something out of this movie, and this is a countdown. The countdown was invented in that movie because when Fritz Lang was developing this movie, he did not know what to do with the sequence before launch. And so he just said, okay, let's count down from 10 to 0. So it was that movie which invented the countdown. It was not the space guys directly, it was done in this movie, and so therefore it's a famous movie from the beginning of last century, already 1929. So it's already there, Woman on the Moon. But what is the next destination? We are talking always also today about exploration, and there are dreams to go to Mars, and some people say Mars is the ultimate goal. I'm not so sure, because there is no ultimate goal for humans. This is my experience. Humans have always the possibility to go further. So we should not today be so arrogant and say what is the ultimate goal of humans. But there is something with today's technology, of course, the ultimate goal is not even Mars. It is closer than Mars. But maybe in the future we have some idea how to make further travels into space. And unfortunately, it's again a man. So I have to apologize for that. So let's go back to the situation where we are today. So today we know that you can go to Mars and back. Okay, some are more optimistic, some are less optimistic, but it takes something like 2 years. And people are saying, yes, we did already some experiments in the Antarctica or in some laboratories that people can survive 1 year in isolation. But the problem is, if you go to Mars in isolation, that means really you cannot go back from the second day of your journey. So that means if you have any health issue after a week or whatever, yeah, then it's your problem. I mean, smaller things you can do yourself, whatever it is, but bigger things you cannot. Therefore, I think the propulsion issue, the safety and security issue, health, psychology, radiation, communication, and a lot more, we have to solve it. And I'm sure humans will go to Mars. But to go to Moon is much easier, so you can do it in a summer vacation, just go there and come back. So therefore also the question whether it will be a tourist or not is a serious question. Let's see what happens in the future. So to go to the Moon, I think, is also a perfect springboard to go further on to Mars and beyond. And this is Samantha Cristoforetti. We saw it already as the last picture in this nice collection of 60 female astronauts. And this is a picture which I think is very important when we are talking about settlements. There are people talking about leaving the Earth to wherever to go to settle over there. But really, this is something which I don't like, because to settle on Moon or Mars means to live in a camp. And I think this picture of Samantha Cristoforetti, it's not an Italian astronaut, it's a European astronaut with an Italian accent. So Samantha took this picture. She shows, of course, the Moon, very nice, that's very good. And she shows also the thin atmosphere above our Earth. So it's a hint that we are a perfect spaceship. The Earth is a perfect spaceship. All of us are astronauts, so there are also females already over here on this spaceship. And the other thing is that she shows over here, this is directly after the landing, she shows here smelling, and her face is saying, I'm so happy to be back. This smelling is so nice. So I think this is a good sign of why are we doing exploration. We are not doing exploration because we want to settle on Moon forever, because we like our Earth, and through exploration we learn more about our Earth and about the universe, which is fine. So now I come more to this question of Moon Village. This is not known, this picture, for many. I learned in foreign countries it's the Asterix and Obelix story. So it's a typical village. What is a village? What is a village? And now I need your little bit imagination. A village, to my understanding, is that some people or whatever come together and say, this is a nice place to be, let's join forces, let's do something together. So they might be diverse. Maybe one is a baker and the other one an undertaker, or whatever you need for daily life. And so diverse interests, diverse actors, diverse activities, also diverse calendars. A village is not formed that all villagers are coming on the same day and say, we are here, we are a village. This is not the way. A village is something which is developing, and there is no strict rule for that. So therefore, village is just that. And you see, there is not in this definition human or female or male, or whatever. Diverse interests, diverse actors, diverse activities, diverse calendars. I say this because whenever I talk about Moon Village, I get immediately the answer to the question, who will be the mayor of that village, and when do you go, and all of this. This is a different and old-fashioned question. So therefore, I hope I get the next one. I have now to come to the other point, and this is what is different to what we are doing today. You see here, this is from the point of view of ESA. We are doing ESA projects for the EU. We are doing public-private partnership projects with industry. We are also performing national projects. This is our day-to-day work. The future of space agencies will be different. We will have industrial projects where the space agencies are just the enablers, not the ones funding it. We will have open concepts, I will come to that again, and also shareholder projects, a totally different type of projects, for instance shareholder projects, where the space agencies are just the equity managers and the project managers. We are not then the authority defining what has to be done here and there, but that different institutions, people, whatever, put some funding into a common project. But now what we are discussing over here is the open concept. It's a totally different way. And I hope that I can make you understand what I mean. This is my problem, not your problem. That's a typical situation when a professor is talking. Sometimes he believes it's the problem of the auditorium not to understand him. In this case, it's my problem if you don't understand me. Open concept. This is the idea. If you have a better name, I change it. An open concept, and I start with NOTS. An open concept is not a single project. Not a single project. Most of our space activities are single projects, right? So it's not. It is not a fixed end-to-end plan. Most of our missions projects have a starting point and have an end point. It is not that, okay? It is not a fully regulated installation. This is the most difficult one I learned. People are asking, do we not have to write at first a regulation and a constitution and all of this? No, it is not a fully regulated institution. It is not a fixed cooperation scheme. It does not say, you are a friend, and you are a friend. No, everybody who would like to participate can participate. It is not a defined timetable, but an open architecture, an international community, and the interfaces are defined only where necessary, not everything defined. So this is the complicated picture, and I'm quite sure that there will questions get afterwards we did not understand. It's my problem, not your problem, okay? Now, the moon. It is an open concept, the Moon Village. So, and you see already over here the different countries, and there is not at all any restriction who could participate in this idea. What is the contents of this open concept? The concept is international, human and or robotic. It must not be human, it must not be robotic, but something. The diverse actors, the diverse contents, please remember what I said. It is public and or private. I don't want to decide whether it is a public entity or a private entity. And I don't want to decide at the beginning who is the master of the game. It's not ESA, it's not me. I have enough vanities for other purposes, but I don't need it over here. It is exploration, it is pioneering, it is outreach. So it's science, technology, engineering, math, and any other subject. So therefore the A is inside. It is what we can do over there. Moon science, the moon is still not really evaluated. We heard about water on the poles, etc. We can do cosmology, for instance, from the far side of the moon, and we should be very careful not to put, again, our radiation on the far side of the moon before starting to have there a radio telescope. It is about fundamental research. It is about technology development, transportation development, communication, and logistics. And then also resource management. If we go to other places in our universe, we should not bring all the stuff over there. If we go to Mars, we should use what is there on Mars, and we can ideally test it, the procedures, 3D printing and so on the moon already. Planetary defense, an important issue.
And from the moon, we have a better point of view, and we can even, if we are looking a little bit far in the future, we can even have some mitigation activities from the moon. And it is a stepping stone, so it's not at all in conflict with other plans to go to Mars or wherever. It is just a stepping stone, but a nice one, I hope. So therefore, I call it Moon Village, and very important is this one. This is the most difficult one. It is free and open access, no limitation, and I hope that, because it's already in realization, that this is the main sentence to be considered. I have a problem with OK. First man on the moon, this was, everybody knows, and it was already mentioned. And I don't know whether you remember what they brought to the moon. They said, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon. We came in peace for all mankind." It was quoted already by you. So now we are looking into the future. First woman on the moon. And this picture is interesting enough. It's from the Aurora program of ESA, some nearly 20 years ago when it was produced. It's not the moon, I know, but it's similar enough. So, and it is a female and a robot. You see, exactly what I said concerning the moon. And my hope is that we will have another message at that time, and that is, oh, no, okay. We will come back with all mankind. So I don't care about the nationality. I don't care about all the different questions. Let's do it together. And I would be very happy and also proud if the Moon Village will be also realized by females. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello. Thanks a lot, Jan. May I remind you to give your feedback on our posters here. You can do it during the breakfast. And Indus's role and commitment to supporting a Moon Village concept is the title of our next distinguished keynote speaker. And I would invite on stage Mrs. Daniela Ricci, systems engineer at Lockheed Martin. Please.
So I'm not sure how I drew the card to follow Jan. I will leave the theatrics for Friday. I don't have any charts for today, but what I do want to talk about is something that's near and dear to my heart, which is a first for women. As we look forward to the first woman on the moon, it's important to acknowledge the women who have led the way. They're the first woman to win the Nobel Prize, the first woman to cross the Atlantic, and the first woman in space, followed by many more. Though it's not just the first we should celebrate, it's also the women in this room that are leading the way through their innovation and influencing the world around them today. It's also all of the women that came before them. Every generation is standing on the shoulders of those before them. We eagerly and wholeheartedly acknowledge the need for diversity and ultimately the benefits we reap when collaboration through diverse thought is achieved. However, diversity requires energy, patience, and a willingness to listen. As I've learned this week through my participation in the Space Generation Congress, our differences bring unique perspectives that are often misunderstood or could be considered contentious. Even though we are of the same generation and occasionally the same gender, 40% this year for my group, it was a great year, we still had geographic differences that required us to step back from our assumptions about the world and have a conversation about what we really mean. Who here would think the word garage or the word rent would bring such vigorous discussion? I did not think this. I thought garage was just for storing junk, but apparently not. So as we worked through these conversations, we sparked debate, and it took time and patience to really work through those differences and understand the other viewpoint. By taking the time to listen to each other, and worked through our misunderstandings, we achieved an even better end product or goal. Though I will say every single one of us did not achieve what we had envisioned at the beginning individually, we achieved something different. It was a compromise through collaboration. I heard a quote earlier this week, which I'll repeat again. I'm sure you've all heard it many times, but I think it's worth repeating. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Many of my managers and coworkers will tell you I really embrace going fast and alone because I am the most impatient person. Though, when I sit down and listen to the diverse perspectives of my coworkers, I am constantly reminded of their brilliance, and that through innovation together, I should sit back and listen to them while we work on a solution that is ultimately better for all of us. Industry, commercial companies, and space agencies are another layer to diversity, especially in the arena of space exploration. Each entity was formed for a different reason and has a different charter. However, each entity has different strengths that need to be leveraged in order to achieve the goal of landing on the moon and creating a moon village. Industry, we bring the experience, the supply chain, the technologies, and the workforce that are needed in the creation of a moon village. Our companies have been part of the quest for knowledge through space exploration for decades. As an example, we at Lockheed Martin have participated in building, manufacturing every entry, descent, and landing system that the US has sent to Mars. There are many other companies and industry that can claim achievements as well as reach back through their depth in their years and decades that's more innovative than the one before. We've established relationships with our suppliers. This is not to be understated for anybody that has tried procurement. We know how to manufacture, and we've established an infrastructure here on Earth that will support these otherworldly endeavors. We also bring healthy competition with each other. A great example is what NASA's doing right now with the Next Step program. NASA's asking 6 industry partners to compete, creating a prototype so that they can test different ideas for the next deep space gateway. This is a wonderful idea on how to create competition that drives innovation. Ultimately, we will all collaborate together for the Deep Space Gateway. And I guarantee you it will look like nobody envisioned individually, but ultimately this platform will allow us to move forward to the moon and then support all of our endeavors, including a moon village. Diversity is vital to space. And when industry is asked to bring solutions and challenges never solved before, we do so with vigor. Working together with industry, commercial companies, and space agencies for a mutually beneficial relationship, we can create and establish a successful moon village, however you envision it. And in building the moon base, it's also the role of industry, along with our partners, to inspire and mentor the next generation. This is incumbent to all of us. As our ventures grow in complexity and ambition, we will need more brilliant minds to solve our unforeseen problems. It's our job to inspire them, to teach them, and to tell them how to collaborate together. Industry, space agencies, and private companies are critical in providing the infrastructure, technologies, and supplies necessary to build and sustain a moon village. The success of the moon village will not be due to the efforts of a single entity, but through collaboration and diverse thought. And with respect to the first woman on the moon, I look forward to train her on the next satellite that will take her to the moon and revel in her success as I watch her take the first steps. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have the pleasure to hear the astronautic perspective, and I am pleased to invite Dr. Sandy Magnus, Executive Director of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and veteran astronaut with almost 160 days in space on 5 missions. Please, Sandy.
Well, good morning, everyone. We are here today to talk about the significance of the steps of the first women on the moon. And it's kind of interesting because we keep track of firsts to mark milestones and records. They mean something to us. They give us an opportunity to record and celebrate our progress in any endeavor. For those of us in the space industry, we've celebrated a lot of firsts over the years. The launch of the first satellite, the first man in space, the first woman in space, the first men on the moon, the first lander on Mars, the first vehicles to exit the solar system, the first spacewalk by both a man and a woman, the first time we sent missions to a comet, to an asteroid. And there are a myriad of other firsts that we celebrate at the national and local levels as well. It's part of our DNA, really, to mark these occasions and make sure that we're highlighting our achievements. It serves as an inspiration for others to follow along the path that is opened up, inspiring other dreams and goals to be achieved. Today we talk about a first that is yet to happen, the first woman to step on the moon. I'm sure it will happen, and when it happens, it'll happen in the context of humanity going back to the moon and stepping out into the solar system beyond low Earth orbit. And clearly that will be an important first step, especially for young girls worldwide. But while that event will yet to be another first for us to celebrate, I want to highlight the importance of the activities that will have taken place prior, around, and as well as those activities that will follow that important first. Because the first of something delineates a single point in time, but does not encompass or communicate the whole story. But mainly, as I mentioned at the onset, it's just a way to track our progress more than anything else. As we continue on our exploration of the solar system and beyond, and engage in adventures off our planet, we should constantly be working to break our own records, to include more and more people in our endeavors, and to increase the pace at which we are achieving these firsts. Since this is an event celebrating and discussing diversity, is something that I think we need to talk about, with this including more and more people aspect in this continuing number of firsts that we hope to achieve. Today, the space community is a large one, and it's very global. However, when you look back 50-ish years ago at the beginnings, there were really only 2 countries involved, the United States and the Soviet Union. Slowly over time, as the foundational knowledge and the operational experience grew, more and more countries entered our sector. Today, it's so exciting to see engagement in space, in all forms, continue to spread around the planet and grow both globally as new states and just as diverse companies and new entrants, both big and small, become active. And they work with the people who, and the industries that had been in space for a while. And those companies and those countries continue to expand the scope of their work. As the community grows, more and more diversity is created in our sector, and this makes us stronger. New entrants bring with them new needs, new goals, new aspirations, and new ways of approaching things that benefit the whole of the space community. The increase in the number of states engaged has brought with it increases in competition, but also opportunities for collaboration. I would argue that the collaborative projects that have been the ones that have benefited the efforts of humanity to reach into space the most. For in collaborative efforts, you have to learn to work together, as Danielle was expressing. You have to work together to achieve the common goal. And I'm going to use an illustration from my experience based on this, the International Space Station program. When you get a group of people together who come from different backgrounds, different sets of experiences, different cultural contexts, you have the formula for a super creative problem-solving community. Because of their differences, it means that everyone is looking at the problem through a different lens and a different context. Each person's reality is slightly different. What that means is that the approach or path that each individual might take to tackle a problem, by definition, is going to be different. And what a rich set of potential solutions that is to draw from. Of course, the hard part happens as was already mentioned, when the group is trying to figure out how to blend, mix, refine, and synthesize all of those very diverse inputs towards developing the final solution. And let me emphasize just how hard that is. Because we all carry around our own version of reality, it is hard sometimes for us to break away from that internal view and realize that there are other realities that exist around us. This can get emotional, it can get cultural, definitely political, it's fraught with peril. And as a diverse group tries to figure out the optimal Venn diagram solution, it takes a lot of patience and it takes a lot of time. Working on the ISS program, I experienced this very strongly. That program embodies both the potential and the pitfalls of having a greatly diverse community working together. I don't have to tell those of you in the room who are engaged on the project the years of discussions, patience, dedication, and constant communication that it took to make that program that is a success that it is today. I also don't have to point out the incredible achievements that that program realized as a result of this patience and dedication. It starts from the design and manufacturing of components all over the world, assembling them in space piece by piece, and they all fit together the first time, by the way, and you know what an amazing achievement that is. And today, the constantly evolving operation of philosophy as we draw different lessons, as we gain experience from how different countries bring their operational philosophy into the program. The program we have today could not have been envisioned when we first started out on that journey over 20 years ago. Working through these issues with patience and dedication involved creating a successful program. It took time. But most of all, it required a collective commitment to the higher goal related to solving the problems that we had. We're actually very fortunate in the space community that we have a strong collective belief in that higher goal. No matter what country we are from or where we live on the planet, that higher goal, exploration of and expansion into space in all the myriad and possible ways, is what allows us to accomplish projects like the ISS and like the project that has yet to be defined that will put the first woman on the moon. The common understanding and striving for this higher goal is the glue that binds us together as a global community and keeps us stuck together as we work through the various differences of opinion or approaches that can act as impenetrable barriers for those in other non-space sectors. I really do believe that one of the most important intangible benefits of the ISS program, if you allow me to refer back to that program, is that it shows what the world can do when we can achieve as a species working together. When we share that common goal, we have a common goal and the conviction that we're going to achieve it. So how can we build on this and move forward? The initiative that IAF President Legal has begun, what we are talking about here today, the power of diversity, is important for the advancement of our community because by drawing attention to the benefits of diversity, having discussions about it, everyone, no matter where you are in the world, works to bring about improvements in their own local communities to increase the diversity. And by the way, doing this not only benefits us as a global space community, but it benefits you and your local communities. President Legal has highlighted 3 Gs, generation, gender, and geographic, but I would argue that really you can extend even beyond that definition as you consider what diversity looks like in your own backyard. It is the differences and experiences that shape our lives and gives rise to different viewpoints. In the US, for example, someone raised in the center of our country in the rural state of Kansas will have a completely different approach and set of experiences as someone raised in New York City. I can list any number of similar comparisons, but I think you get the point. So the question we have to ask ourselves is how in our own organization, in our own communities, do we go about building a diverse set of people so that we can capitalize on the power of the collective? It is likely to take time. It's likely that over time, slowly and naturally, diversity will evolve organically. But do we really want to wait that long? Can we afford to wait that long? What we do in our industry is very complex and very demanding, but we are problem solvers by nature. And if we can do something proactively and concretely to increase our chances of arriving at creative and beneficial solutions to the challenges of expanding off the planet, then we should absolutely be taking those actions. As you leave here today, think to yourself, what can you do to help increase diversity in our industry? But we all know this is not an easy path. Mindfully and thoughtfully trying to increase engagement with new groups of people requires the conscious breakdown of stereotypes, consciously keeping an open mind, Being open to the idea that just because something has been done a certain way for a very long time doesn't mean that it has to keep happening that way. And being open to change. But most importantly, it means being able to listen, I mean really listen, to other people. Any one of these things is hard. Taken together, it requires a huge amount of dedication and attention, as well as priority. So how do we start actively working on growing our diversity? At AIAA, we started a diversity working group 3 years ago, and our efforts are still in what I would call the nascent phase, the beginning phase. What I've observed is that we all tend to default to our existing networks when we need something, whether that is advice, searching for a leadership slot to fill, a speaker for a panel, or someone to offer an opportunity to. It's only natural. What I've challenged our members at AIAA to do is to reach out into the network of people in other networks, so try and go and network beyond yours. That's an easy step, and it gets you to a second-order network, and the chances that you'll reach into a wider diversity group of people is much greater. And you'll be expanding your network at the same time. So for example, if you're looking for a speaker on a panel, call someone in your network and ask them to call someone in their network. That's a very easy thing to do. It's a small step, but it's an important one because it forces you to think out of the box. Another example of something that you can do is when you're in a conference or an environment where there's a meeting going on, for example, and you're in a comfortable situation, look around the room and see who looks a little uncomfortable or see who looks kind of new to the group. Reach out to that person, welcome them into the group, introduce yourself, and make sure they're included as part of the conversation. This could be someone who's new to the group geographically, gender-wise, experience-wise, a new industry. It could be any sort of diversity background, but just reach out. In this manner, you're also helping yourself because you're building your network and creating more diversity in your own network. Another potential action is to mentor. Reach out to someone who's a little bit different than you or someone who's in a different situation than you and offer to be a mentor, offer to be that person, especially for young people where they can go to for advice. So diversity is not just about getting a wider representation of backgrounds, ages, countries, and experiences, but it's including those viewpoints. So seek out people with different viewpoints. Have a conversation with them. Listen to them. Be open to different ideas. It's really hard. You have to get out of your comfort zone, and you have to be willing to expend energy in this. But the rewarding part is you learn something in the process. And we all have so many different experiences in our backgrounds. It's rare that I don't have a conversation with someone that I've just met that I don't learn some really interesting thing or new, wonderful insight about the world. I remember, for example, on my first flight, one of my crewmates approached things in a completely opposite way as I do. And for some of my colleagues in the room, you can probably know who this is. I'm a very logical, linear thinker. I'm very organized. This individual had a much more organic approach to life, was very free-form in his thinking and his problem solving. Neither his approach nor my approach was better than the other. And I could have allowed this organic, somewhat not organized approach at life to really make me crazy. I decided just to sit back and watch. And it was really a wonderful thing for me because I learned a lot from how he approached the world. And it was one of the most rewarding learning experiences that I've had. And if I wouldn't have been willing to get out of my comfort zone, I would have missed some wonderful experiences. So that was really an important lesson for me. It shows that we all have something to contribute, no matter what our skill sets. And again, that goes back to the power of diversity. So in closing, I would encourage you to ask how you can reach out to diverse groups, inspire them to contribute, and set up mechanisms where they're included in the conversation. The faster we can do this globally and locally, the sooner we will be celebrating those footsteps made by the first woman on the moon. Thank you very much.
And now it is my pleasure to welcome the IAF Vice President for Diversity Initiatives, Mrs. Mary Snitch from Lockheed Martin.
Thank you, Lena. And I almost didn't have any any wrap-up remarks to make because we only had 8 people who made a vote and cast your opinion. And so we're going to report on those results. But then what I might ask is that before the Diversity Awards lunch today, that before you leave today, that you stop by and voice your opinion on these questions, and then maybe we can update the results at the lunch. So what do we have, Christian, wherever you are? Do we have the slides showing the results, or I can speak to them? There they are. Okay, great. So you see that the consensus is of the votes that we might not know what the nationality is. And that was actually my vote. I will say that I wrote unknown under others. And we have no way of knowing where that first woman on the moon is going to come from. And I might suggest that the first woman on the moon is right now a young girl sitting in a small African village. She might be in Nepal or India or in a very remote and poverty-stricken area. So we don't know where she is going to come from. I think that Professor Werner said that nationality really doesn't matter. I mean, it's an interesting aspect of the diversity and where this first woman on the moon is going to come from, but she could come from anywhere. So the next slide, if you have that. Okay. So I think it's sort of a non-brainer that we all probably think that the next woman on the moon is going to be the next generation, a supporter and participant in an organization like SGAC, or certainly a young professional. And again, that woman is right now sitting as in a grade school, being inspired and motivated to get into this industry and to possibly become the first woman on the moon. And then our last statistic, do we have that? Just a second. And when is it going to be? And most of us said, again, there were only 6 votes on this, but before 2025. And that all goes to, I would say, Danielle Ritchie's point of view that being impatient can be a really good thing. It's not a negative thing, so let's get going and get that first woman on the moon. I would just like to add, before we close today, first of all, thanks to all of our panelists. They were absolutely wonderful. The speakers were, as always, very inspiring and just to the point of 3G idea diversity. I would also like to just offer my point of view, and that is being diverse in any of our organizations and practicing true diversity is just a way of doing good business. It is a best practice that should be at the top of the list, because if you aren't practicing diversity, you're missing out. You aren't opening your door to all of the best and brightest talent. And so it is a critical aspect. I am thrilled, the IAF Bureau is thrilled that President Legault has made this such a core part of his president's agenda. I am personally honored to have that in my portfolio as VP for Diversity Initiatives. And having this large crowd here today is very indicative of how important it is to all of us. So I would, with that, thank you all for coming. This was an excellent breakfast. I invite you, please, if you have time on your calendar, please be at the Diversity Awards lunch today, where our friends from the UAE will be receiving the first ever 3G IDEA Diversity Award. And that was selected in these recent months. And we look forward to making that award to you today. So thank you very much.
With this, we will close the official part of this breakfast. Thanks a lot to the IAF President, IAF Vice President, all distinguished keynote speakers, and please enjoy the networking and see you at the joint IAF-IDEA via Europe Diversity Breakfast tomorrow morning, again at 7 o'clock. I hope to see you all there. Thank you.